The biggest night yet in the race for the White House. Polls closing right this minute in California and Utah. But as it stands, as you saw, Donald Trump having a very good night, already sweeping a majority of the states in place. So far, it looks like about 11. We will get to that as the night goes on. And after tonight, winning a windfall of delegates, the former president is expected to be a stone's throw away from clinching the GOP nomination. Meantime, from the Nikki Haley campaign, we are hearing crickets. We're now being told that she will not be making any public remarks tonight. And of course, if that changes, we will bring you that. The president also not speaking, but we will be speaking for the next 2 hours. We have Team Fox coverage. Aisha Husney is live at the Trump campaign headquarters in West Palm Beach, Florida. Bill Malugin live in Charleston, South Carolina, with how Nikki Haley is handling the results. Rich Edson live in Laredo, Texas, with how the border crisis is impacting the ballot box there. And the White House correspondent Peter Doocy live at the White House with what tonight's primary results could mean for a rematch between Trump and Biden. But first, let's bring in the hosts of the previous show, Brett Baer and Martha McCallum, tracking all your Super Tuesday election results. Brett and Martha, thank you so much for kind of sticking with us for a few minutes here. Martha, to you first. I saw you talking to the panel all night long. I'm curious, what was your big takeaway of the night? What did you find surprising as the night went on?
Well, Trace, I think if you rewound a few years, a lot of people would not have expected that we would be where we are tonight. And it is an incredible political comeback story for anybody who covers politics or watches all of this. I think we are witnessing something extraordinary. I also think that when you look at the mix of voters and how it's shifting in the country, you look at the increase in Hispanic and Black votes that it appears we're seeing in some of these categories. We're watching something that is very dynamic in this country. And you're also watching a reaction to 3 years. And we'll see how it goes. But it looks like people are getting the matchup that, some people said they didn't want. But the gravity is clearly behind these two candidates right now.
Yeah, they are. And you look at what President Trump did tonight, Brett, and you kind of think, I was just listening to Trey Gowdy earlier talking about, maybe the possibility of a Reagan mandate. If this thing goes the way that he was talking about. Was that a surprising comment? Because Martha's right. We see some of these polls, the Hispanic voters, the Black voters, the things that the Biden administration is doing right and the wrong numbers are always much higher. What do you think about that kind of analysis, Brett?
Yeah, listen, we're going to see how these months go. We are 8 months from the day from the general election. That is a long time. It's the longest general election we will ever have seen in our lifetime up till now. I will say this, to Martha's point, it is a remarkable political comeback. Think of how many things have been thrown at former President Trump. Think about how many legal cases he still has yet to fight. He's, how many charges he's facing. And in the wake of that, he is getting overwhelming response from voters. Not just, a different coalition of voters. You were talking about, in some cases, Reagan Democrats. These are union workers who have decided they want to vote for Donald Trump in some of these primaries. He has defeated all of his challengers, and if you look back 2 years, we would not have predicted this day. You would have said, this is going to be Governor Ron DeSantis. This is going to be somebody else besides former President Trump.
Speaking of that somebody else, Martha, you have Nikki Haley on your show quite a bit. You kind of know what she's been going through and thinking. What do you think after tonight? She has clearly not going to speak tonight. She has no plans or events through tomorrow. Do you think Nikki Haley is done, or does she keep going?
You know what? There's no doubt that they're in an evaluation phase at this moment. I mean, the numbers are what they are. She always said that she wanted to allow many states to weigh in before she would get out of this race or consider getting out of this race. I think after tonight, those become very concrete issues to deal with. She's lost some of her financial backing in recent weeks as well, and she needs to evaluate where she wants to be as a candidate and what she wants her political future to look like. But I think enough people on the panel tonight gave her a lot of credit. No woman has ever gotten farther in the Republican presidential process than she has. And she watched a lot of the fellows, as she likes to say, fall by the wayside. I think she deserves a lot of credit for fighting a good fight here.
Yeah, and lastly to you, Brett, the former president's speech tonight, some called it conciliatory, some called it subdued. What would you call it?
It was a soft touch by the former president. He was it was not the traditional firebrand kind of going after a number of different targets. He was giving his assessment of where his administration was and how bad he thinks the situation is now. I think there was probably, a possibility to have a dismount that maybe was on a teleprompter. That we talked about that with the panel, where there was this soundbite. But maybe that was his pitch. He does things a lot off the cuff. And this was an off the cuff speech, probably from the heart, to his supporters in Mar-a-Lago. I will say this. Nikki Haley, no matter what happens after today, will have some people on the convention floor in Milwaukee from Vermont and from the District of Columbia who will nominate her for the presidency of the United States. And we'll see what happens to her campaign after this.
Yeah, Brett, Martha, and your panel, exceptional work as always. Thank you for coming on the show. We very much appreciate it.
Oh, good to be with you, Trace.
Well, continuing coverage now, Super Tuesday with tonight's results. A rematch of the 2020 presidential election between Biden and Trump looks even more likely. The White House correspondent Peter Ducey is live at the White House with more on this. Peter, good evening.
Good evening, Trace. And all has been quiet here in person at the White House. But about 45 minutes ago, we got the first reaction to tonight's results from President Biden himself. And when you look at the 5 paragraphs of the text that they sent over, there's some stuff about what Biden would do with a second term, but it's a lot more about Donald Trump. And we pulled out the key paragraph of the president's statement. It says, if Donald Trump returns to the White House, all of this progress is at risk. He is driven by grievance and grift, focused on his own revenge and retribution, not the American people. He is determined to destroy our democracy, rip away fundamental freedoms like the ability for women to make their own health care decisions, and pass another round of billions of dollars in tax cuts for the wealthy, and he'll do anything to put himself in power. And even though Donald Trump is President Biden's focus right there, at some point tonight, in the war room in Wilmington, Delaware, where the re-election is based, a name crossed people's computer screens there, the campaign staff, that they were not expecting. That name, Jason Palmer. He defeated President Biden in American Samoa from out of nowhere. I checked in with the campaign. They don't seem too worried about it because American Samoa also went uncommitted in 2016 over Bernie and Clinton. And then in 2020, we saw Michael Bloomberg win it. So that was the main surprise. When I checked in with campaign staff, they also sent over a list of things that they are looking at tonight. And again, it focuses a lot less on the primary process and a lot more on what they think are openings for them in this general election fight with Trump, particularly his weakness with Haley voters, according to exit polls that were taken across the country today. Trace?
Gives us very unique insight into the strategy going ahead for the president and his campaign. Peter Ducey live for us in the White House. Peter, thank you for staying up. We appreciate it. And now it is off to Florida and inside the Trump campaign with their reaction to tonight's results. Aisha Husney is live for us in West Palm Beach. Aisha, good evening.
Trace, good evening to you. Well, you heard it there directly from the former president. He absolutely claiming victory tonight. But in that 20-minute speech, the most glaring part of it all was that he never mentioned Nikki Haley's name once, not once. And he did that as he, of course, took victory tonight, even as there are still some states that are yet to be tallied. Watch this.
They call it Super Tuesday for a reason. This is a big one. This was an amazing night, an amazing day. It's been an incredible period of time in our country's history. It's been sad in so many ways, but I think it's going to be inspiring because we're going to do something that, frankly, nobody's been able to do for a long time.
So there's been a lot of talk about unity, Trace. Haley has been accusing Trump of dividing and alienating voters, especially her voters, non-MAGA voters. Here's Trump addressing how he plans on uniting Americans.
I've been saying lately, success will bring unity to our country, and it happened before. We had the best economy our country's ever had. They wanted to get together, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, women, men, people with diplomas from the best schools in the world, and people that didn't graduate from high school. Every single group was doing better than ever before, and it was a beautiful thing.
He did talk plenty about President Trump, calling him the worst president in our nation's history. Also talked a lot at length about the border. Clear signs, clear indications that he is wanting to now pivot to the general election. And we'll see more of that as he heads to Georgia this Saturday. You'll see dueling remarks from both the former president and President Biden. Both of them will be in Georgia at the same time. Trace?
Aisha Husney live for us in Florida. Aisha, we'll get back to you as the news warrants. Thank you. We have some breaking news coming in to Fox News at night. We can now project that both former President Trump and President Biden will win the state of California tonight, and that kind of includes that whole clean sweep. We are still checking into the numbers of uncommitted voters in California and the other states. We know there are 3 or 4 states for President Biden that uncommitted came into double digits. We will talk with the panel about that coming up as well. Meantime, will Super Tuesday be the end of Nikki Haley's campaign? Bill Melugin is live in Charleston, South Carolina tonight with that. Bill, good evening.
Trace, good evening to you. I wish we could offer you some more insight, but we have not heard from Nikki Haley's campaign in about 4 hours now. It has been total radio silence. We know that she is here in the Charleston area watching these returns privately with her campaign staff, and as of hours ago, we were told they were all in a good mood waiting for those returns. We have not gotten an update from them yet as to how they are feeling now. What we do know is Nikki Haley just won her first state of this primary, Vermont. You can take a look at this graphic on the screen right here. Vermont, the very first state of the primary, she won in. She campaigned there on Sunday. She was in Burlington. This is her second win of the primary. She previously won the District of Columbia, but this was one of the states she was expected to do well in on this all-important Super Tuesday. But she's been crisscrossing the country in recent days trying to perform well tonight. Take a look at this graphic. These are just some of the states she was in over the last week or so, and you'll notice some of the states on there: Virginia, Minnesota, Maine, some of these Super Tuesday states. Several of them have already been called for Donald Trump, so the night has not been going the way the Nikki Haley campaign was hoping as they were coming into the night. And again, we have not heard anything from them. We reached out to them to see if they have any reaction to the win in Vermont. We have not heard back from them just yet. Back out here live, these initial returns that have been coming in are very likely going to raise more questions as to what Nikki Haley's path forward is following this Super Tuesday. And as you just heard Aisha mention, during Donald Trump's speech tonight, he did not mention Nikki Haley or bring up her name a single time in about 20 minutes of speaking. We'll send it back to you, Trace.
He appears very confident. Bill Melugin live for us in South Carolina. Bill, thank you. As the second biggest delegate prize of this Super Tuesday, the stakes are especially high in Texas, given the state of the southern border crisis. The senior national correspondent, Rich Edson, is live for us in Laredo, Texas, with more on that. Rich, good evening.
Hey, good evening, Trace. Well, a record number of migrants have crossed the southern U.S. border during this administration. And if you look at some of the recent polling ongoing right now, in several recent polls, immigration, border issues have risen to among the top concerns among American voters. It's something both presidential frontrunners have been mentioning, have been sparring directly with one another over just the past week. They've both offered very detailed, very different strategies for addressing the border surge. President Biden and former President Trump even visited the border last week in Texas on the same day, though a few hundred miles apart. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar represents the border district here in Laredo. He's been pushing the